This is Carlos Licea, and we're reporting from Ventura County, where we have entered into a very interesting case, sad case, about a woman who sits in jail today for having given birth to a baby in a field, and that baby was left to die. Sounds horrible, doesn't it? And yet there are some circumstances in this case that are really heart-wrenching, and at the same time will make us explore what a woman goes when she is raped, left pregnant, and basically let out to hang by everybody else. We're going to talk to Dennis O'Leary, who's been working in this case. So now we go on to talk to him. Dennis, I want to ask you about how did you get involved with this case and how do you find out about this lady, Rosalba Cruz?
Yes. Well, the first thing I heard was news reports on or around May 21st, 2012. I was watching the news like everybody else and saw that there was a tragedy in our local strawberry fields, that a baby had been found dead in the strawberry fields. About a week later, I received a phone call at my school during a break, and a sheriff's officer called up and introduced himself and said that he was on the Major Crimes Division of the Sheriff's Department. My heart stopped because immediately I thought something had happened to a loved one that I needed to know about. Uh, he started asking me if I had heard about the baby who had been found, and I told him I did. And he asked for help to see if I could possibly do an outreach to find the mother of the baby. At the time, he and I agreed. We believed that somehow the mother was a victim. Uh, there was little known, but what was known was the baby had been born of natural birth, full term, and other than being left abandoned to die in the field, there was no abuse, physical abuse, on the body of the baby. He believed that the baby could very well have been indigenous, and that was about all that we knew at the time. Uh, it took me 24 hours. I went home, spoke to my wife, talked to a couple friends, and I called them back and said that I would do an outreach with a couple conditions. I wanted to make sure that if and when we found the mother, that we would have medical attention available, that we would have psychological attention available, and that in the process of looking for the mother, that we could advertise the law that allows a mother to give up a baby within 3 days, no questions asked, in the state of California. It's called the Safe Surrender of a Baby Law. And it's a very unfortunate situation, but this law has already saved hundreds of lives up and down the state of California, and actually dozens of lives here in Ventura County alone over the past 10 years. So we got on the radio. I had radio interviews in English, in Spanish, and we had translation into Mixteco. We also had a news broadcast on our local Channel 3 TV station as well, to try to find the mother and then also advertise this law that our community needs to be reminded of periodically. After that, nothing happened. It was somewhat quiet, and I personally expected that whoever the mother was, that she probably had left the area and maybe was just passing through the area at the time. I had personally kind of given up hope that we would know any more details. Though periodically I'd get a phone call from my contacts at the sheriff's department saying just the opposite, that they believed that they were optimistic that someday, we would know the rest of the story. And through no help of my own, I'll be the first to admit, they the sheriff's department was able to locate the family of the mother first, and eventually the mother. They did it not through my outreach, but apparently through DNA that they had taken from the field workers uh, in the field where the baby had been found. Apparently, one of the workers was a match, I was told, to be either the mother or the aunt of the woman who gave birth. And so they started pinpointing a family and location, not knowing whether the actual mother was still around naturally, but they felt confident that eventually somebody would be picked up and questioned.
Okay, and now this woman in case, can you tell us about her a little bit, because that's what's interesting, who the human being is behind this, what may seem to be to some people a horrible event, and yet there is a deeper story behind it. Please.
And that was something that I dealt with for quite a long time because I, naturally was very curious who this person was, who would do this, and the question was, what were the circumstances? I received a phone call the day before Thanksgiving, 2012, saying that the person had been picked up under charges of false documentation. They believed it was the mother of the baby. And slowly I started getting more details. Who is this person? And I had great interest in also finding, getting maybe possibly getting to know this person myself as well. The first things that I learned was uh, she was 19 years old. She was from southern Mexico, Mixteco, and the sheriff's department reported to me that through DNA and through apparently questioning, they believed that she had been raped by a family member. From that point, uh, she had relatives that lived here in Oxnard, and my words, it appears that she fled to the safety of her relatives, to her family here in the United States, here locally. Um, at that point, that was about all I knew. But a couple months later, I was still dealing with the idea of maybe going and somehow speaking with her in person to put a face and a voice with the story that I had known about and wanted to know about. And I got a phone call from a representative of the Mexican consulate who asked if I could talk to Rosalba Cruz Moran because apparently they wanted to know whether Rosalba was interested in having contact with the Mexican consulate. They had said that they had talked to family members of hers who said no, that she was not interested. And apparently policy from the Mexican consulate was they needed to be invited by the person or the family. And they were a little dumbfounded that the family said no. I went. That was my excuse, I guess. I went to see her not knowing how I'd introduce myself, not knowing if she would speak to me, and honestly not knowing even if she knew Spanish or English or, that we could communicate. I sat down and found Rosalba to be a very young woman in appearance. She speaks very good Spanish. And I introduced myself pretty much of what I've just mentioned to you, that I had been involved in this for quite a while that I was not a representative. I did not work for the sheriff's department or the police department or law enforcement. I was just part of the community. And I did mention that I was a school teacher, and she kind of opened up when she heard that. Um, it was quite interesting. I probably was the first person. In fact, I know I was the first person other than law enforcement to speak to her while she was in jail at that time.
Which is interesting because, uh, especially in Latin America, school teachers are people who are very much respected. They are listened to, and so they are looked up. And so it's not strange for me that she would approach you or at least talk to you at that moment.
And I appreciated that. In fact, she could have very well said no, thank you, and walked away, and she had every right to. I had basically four questions for her at the time. The questions were: number one, did she feel good about her legal representation? Did she feel good about medical attention? Had she had any counseling or psychological help since she had been incarcerated? And lastly, if she wanted to have contact with the Mexican consulate. Uh, the legal representation, she said that she had spoken to a person for just a few minutes before her arraignment, and she really didn't speak much at that moment with, at that time, who was her public defender. Um, she said that medical attention, there was nobody at the time, she said, that spoke Spanish. And basically, there were signs of pointing and what, and that she'd received a couple aspirins at one point for a headache or what. No psychological help or counseling whatsoever. And then finally, the Mexican consulate, she actually said, yes, by all means, she wanted to see them. But she says under one condition: she wanted them to be in person, not over the phone, which honestly makes sense. I would have probably said the same thing. She wanted to actually be able to see the person eye to eye. I delivered that message to the Mexican consulate, and then the next obstacle came along. And that obstacle was the consulate informed me that at the time here in Ventura County, and they said only in Ventura County, whether that's true or not, the Mexican consulate was not allowed to speak to Mexican citizens in prison in Ventura County unless it was either audio taped over the telephone with a window between the two, such as my interview with Rosalba, or with a member of the DA's office present. And the consulate said that they believed that this was a violation of the Geneva Convention. So all of a sudden, I'm having thrown at me, this is an international law that they believed was not being enforced here in Ventura County. I called up a couple friends of mine who are attorneys and found out that they were probably right. I personally didn't realize that the Geneva Convention had anything to do with prisoners above and beyond prisoners of war, but apparently it's the policy for all foreign nationals in any prison throughout the world to have the Geneva Convention show how the person is treated.
Okay, and let's make it a point here that also it works the other way around. Whenever an American citizen is in jail in another country, that citizen has the right to speak to an American uh, consulate official or embassy official, and that is the way that happens all the time. You simply need the support of the representatives of your country, and of course that's what you were doing with her, but simply seeking that kind of representation.
Correct. In fact, an American citizen in a foreign country, I would think the first thing that they want is to speak to somebody from the American government. Um, I set up a meeting. We had a meeting in the offices of Supervisor John Zaragoza. We had invited a representative from the sheriff's department, and I was very pleased the day that the interview came that Sheriff Giafdin showed up himself. And I knew at that point that this was going to be a very serious conversation. And we also had the attorney from the Mexican consulate and myself. And in the conversations, basically we discussed all the different options. We had not really come to an agreement at the end of the conversations other than to look into it. But I'm pleased to say that quietly the issue was resolved. And it's my understanding that the consulate from here on has been allowed and will be allowed to interview citizens from Mexico without having a representative of our judicial system present. Well,
Okay. Now, let me interrupt you for a second.
sure.
Now that we have cleared this whole part about the legal representation and the consulate presence, what has been the response from Rosalba's family? That is what I find interesting. Is there any kind of response? Are they helping? Are they hindering? What kind of support does she have?
You know, that part, I can only say my opinion. I mean, originally, apparently, they had said that she was not interested or they were not interested in having a member of the consulate come to them. So,
Sorry, hey,
that's okay.
we had a couple bees on us right here.
Okay, I'm
Oh
seeing
my
picking
God.
off things.
So I had to throw it off me and Carlos.
Okay,
Sorry
bee.
about that.
you're very sweet.
Yeah, they're
I'm a diabetic.
and it was right here on
Yeah.
me and it landed on.
Okay,
Sorry about
that's
that.
okay.
That's okay. What is this?
Okay, go back to your. Can you remember your question?
Or I'll start with the answer.
Yeah. Okay.
No, we will go back to the family.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay. Just tell me about the family. What has been the family's response?
Well, the family, it's very interesting. Well, first off, I do know that apparently when the consulate first contacted the family was not interested in having a representative of the Mexican government speak with Rosalba. Beyond that, I can only give my opinion, on different issues. One response that that the family has taken that I can give my opinion on is that the family hired a private attorney, an attorney from Ventura, city of Ventura. His name is Mr. Joe Lax. And word is that the first red flag for me was that the family had put together $10,000 to pay Mr. Lax for his fees. And my concern, and actually speaking with people from the Mexican consulate as well, their concern was that for the family, I'm sure this is a lot of money for an attorney working on a murder charge in a complex issue like this. I considered it a drop in the bucket. And I was very concerned whether Mr. Lax was doing this somewhat pro bono or whether he was basically just shuffling papers and allowing Rosalba to go to prison for life. I went to speak to Mr. Lax the day before she was to have her pretrial hearing, which happened towards the middle part of this year, 2013. And I was able to talk to him on the phone, got an interview, and the evening before the pretrial, I had to sit down in his office. I introduced myself and was a little surprised that he hadn't heard about my involvement or a few other issues that I thought were pertinent in the case. And Mr. Lax didn't have to share any information on his ideas of the case, but he did. One of the things that he spoke about to me was that he didn't believe that the allegation or the fact that Rosalba was a 19-year-old young lady who had been raped by a family member was pertinent to the case. That he said that he was going to argue he planned on arguing in court that when Rosalba was interrogated by the sheriff's department, that she had been interrogated in Spanish and not in Mixteco, which, I told him I thought that was a very interesting argument. And I told him personally I would think that would be a very good discussion in a college or university logics class or law class. But I wasn't sure whether a jury would be persuaded by that argument. And I asked him, I said, now I have a question. I asked Mr. Lax, do you speak Mixteco? And he said, no. I said, do you speak Spanish? He said, no. And so I asked him, I said, well, in the court, you're going to have a translator, I would expect, right? And he said, yes. And I says, okay, I'm going to guess here. I'm a juror, and I'm listening to you argue that Rosalba needed to be interrogated in Mixteco. And I said, what language is your translator speaking to Rosalba from your English to what language? And he looked at me and he said, Spanish. Well, and I asked him, I said, if Mixteco was so important for her to be interrogated with, because it's a serious issue, why aren't you getting a translator to speak to Rosalba in court in Mixteco as well? And we just kind of left that at that point. He said that I was used by the sheriff's department, he believed. And I told him that that could very well be so, but I was interested in justice, whichever form that takes for Rosalba. But that I still told him, and I believe to this day, that justice includes knowing all the facts and not just the simple argument to whether she was interrogated in Mixteco or in Spanish or in English. On the way out from that interview, Mr. Lax basically walked with me to the door of his small office. And while walking, he shocked me. I didn't ask him. He volunteered. And he said, well, in any case, Rosalba is guilty, and she's going to do life in jail. Which really stunned me, because where his prediction may very well be found to be true, this is her attorney volunteering this comment to me. Now, throughout the whole process of this, my advocacy for justice and for Rosalba and for the baby, I've had one other advocate who's stepped up to help, Theodora David Cornyn, who is a minister, and she has been able to visit Rosalba almost on a weekly basis. And I've actually asked Theodora to do this partly because Theodora's a woman, and Rosalba needs somebody to speak to. And I don't fit that bill as much as I believe Theodora could help. Well, I talked to Theodora about my interview with Rosalba's attorney and found out that the same attorney had said the same thing to Theodora on another occasion, that his client was guilty and that she was going to do life. That was an important issue for us.
Right. This is a question I have is, it's a good thing for an attorney, just like a doctor, to give a prognosis, but it's like going to a stranger. It's a little bit, sounds like almost like conflict to me. And why would he think that? Why would he say that to you, being a third party?
And why would he volunteer to say it to me? Which surprised me as well. He didn't have to say it. He might have been thinking this, but he didn't have to voluntarily say it. Um, Theodore and I decided that we were going to speak to Rosalba again. And this actually would have been my third visit to Rosalba over the year. And we went together and sat down, and I tried very hard to let Rosalba know of my opinion of what had been happening and what I had heard in my conversation with Mr. Lax. I tried very hard to let her know that she had every right to be represented by the person she decided that she wanted to represent her in court. And I went to pains to try to let her know that she should think about this and that it was her decision. My goal is not to do any harm because I don't know what the outcome is, and I'm not an attorney either. We spoke for a good 45 minutes to an hour, but about halfway through the conversation, Rosalba actually said, "No, I'm going to switch attorneys. I'm going to go to the public defender." And I almost tried to discourage her from making the decision in front of me. I, wanted her to think about it, but I believed that that was the right decision. We basically finished our conversation shortly after and went home.
One thing I want to know, because right now you said something kind of interesting,
Sure.
is that you talked to her about rights, and you talked to her about things that she needed to do. But all this time, doing that, this is an attorney that the family picked up on their own.
Right.
But has anybody even mentioned anything like this to her? And I also have a sense that did she understand the legal system? And we're talking about basically at the time a 19-year-old young woman who came here with no knowledge of basically the laws. I understand that she basically sneaked across the border,
Right.
and she was pregnant already. Those are the facts I understand. And she came basically to work in the field. But did she know anything else beyond that? Or was she simply a young woman caught up in a situation where she did not understand what was happening to her and what was happening in the legal system, that she unwittingly had already violated the law by being an undocumented worker? Because this is at the heart of the case. People are going to say she's an undocumented worker, she was pregnant, she is guilty as hell. But that's not the case.
Yeah, whether she understands the legal system, I would think, I would think that she doesn't entirely understand everything that's going on. I know that she has her best interest at heart. I would imagine anybody in prison would. And she knows the entire story. I mean, there's questions that I want answered myself because when I'm speaking to her with a telephone and a glass between us, I know very well that the sheriff's department is taping the conversation as well. I am not going to ask her questions that are going to incriminate her. I am not an attorney. So there's things that I do want to know. What my opinion is again, we had a woman who fled to the United States, pregnant from a rape, from a family member, came to stay with family of hers here, and somehow all the safety nets that our community and our governments have put up to protect people and to help people and to help herself and help her unborn baby, somehow that information either did not get to her or was not used by her. We failed in that sense. The last of the laws is the safe delivery of a baby law. But apparently, there was no medical attention. She did not know about prenatal care. She did not know or did not use all the different programs that are available. So myself, being a community member, and I consider myself an activist, I failed in that. And all our organizations that are out there to help women in these types of situations, somehow our information did not get to her or was not used by her. That I'm going to have to find out probably in the trial. Um, Now, on her legal representation, it's her right and her family's right to decide how they're going to do this. Um, and I cannot force her to elect who she believes can best represent her in court. I believe, my opinion, that her family has been an obstacle to her. And I'm sure she loves her family very much. I know her family has visited her many times in jail since her incarceration. In fact, one of the things that happened was documentation was presented to allow her family members to go to the jail to visit her. And I'm sure that has helped her get through this now just over a year of her being incarcerated. But my question is the family truly trying to help her in this legal case, or is the family distracting the legal system from all the issues to allow her to be found guilty and receive life? Because if we go on the line of whether she was interviewed in English, Spanish, or Mixteco, and that's the only defense, then we're not going to be hearing the answers to the questions of who else was involved in this case. What were the
Right,
circumstances?
because here we have something which is more complicated. It's not as simple
No.
as it seems. She didn't just cross the border to come here and start picking strawberries. She came here basically seeking the help from her family, and she did it the way that many other Oaxacans come in here. They simply cross the border, and she came here to stay with the family.
Right.
So she she already came under very special circumstances, very difficult circumstances. So this is where I am trying to figure out how the system can help. Okay, over here we're gonna take a little break.